everyone? Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruson. We're doing another indie horror spotlight with a returning guest. He's a director, and he has a film that actually just premiered in my home state of North Carolina, and it is actually going to be hopefully streaming soon for everyone to watch, and it's called You're It. Welcome back, everyone. Ron Rossman Jr. Ron, welcome back to the Horror Room.
Travis, thank you for having me back on. It's an absolute honor. So thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So listen, for people who don't know, tell them about You're It.
So yeah, You're It is it's hard to explain. The best description I've had is someone told me it feels like if Stephen King wrote a slasher film, because it's very story and character driven. Because, you know, slasher films, all of the casualties are collateral. You don't really get to know the victims. Either you're going for like the gore porn angle, or it's just kind of cheesy. So what we try to do is recapture what Halloween did. So it has that 80s vibe, but it's also very contemporary. So what happens is a film crew decides to shoot a retro horror film at a haunted trail. And while they're there, they actually get hunted by a real serial killer. And then there's a subplot where a cop is trying to figure out who this serial killer is to stop them. So it's got those two storylines kind of paralleling each other. And it works. It works. And I'm really proud of it. It started with a conversation with the executive producer, Greg Watson, who works for Marvel. He used to work for Marvel Comics, Zenescope. He's done artwork for the new Watchmen series on HBO and for 20th Century Television. We were talking about the movies that made us, that great Netflix series. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about Halloween, which is, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan, and the only really slasher film I enjoy. And because I don't really feel like it was a slasher. I think it started the slasher genre, truly launched it. But if you think about it, it's more almost like a psychological thriller. It's not gory. It's not. The second one is by far, but I think Friday the 13th kind of took it to that next level. And even that was more of a horror film than a slasher until the second film. But we talked about, why don't people just get back to the basics? It seems like we're trying too much with narratives and agendas and all this extra stuff. Would people like just again stripped down formula slasher film, but having character, having story, liking the characters, feeling, so if one dies, you're like, oh my God, that kind of thing, humanizing it. And that's what birthed You're It. And so they're trying to hide from this killer, playing a game of hide and seek, and you don't know if the killer's supernatural or not. So we leave a lot of loose ends. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to make.
And listen, I 100% agree with you. So the original Halloween is my favorite horror movie of all time. I can do away with a lot of sequels, but the original one, yes, but it gives you that character development. It has that strong acting. It has that presence outside of the actual killer. Yeah, and it focused more on the story and these teenagers and these residents in this town that are getting, haunted by this. Yeah, this
and they're not guilty. Unlike Friday the 13th, which was, we're gonna do the whole sex kills thing. This was just normal people living their lives in a very mundane town. Any town. That's what made it scary. It could be anywhere. Michael Myers was a person who could exist, and so it made it. That's why after I agree with you, at the second film when they went the more supernatural out, it loses some of its thing, because it's more scary to think the guy could be living next door to you than it might be a ghost. So that's what I love about it, and that's what we wanted to do with this. We wanted to keep, could he be supernatural still in the back of the head, but we wanted to make a killer that could be someone out there that you would run into, and the worst place would be a haunt, because there's already things there to scare you, so you don't know what's real and what's not. And by the time you discern that, it's already too late.
Now I have a question. So when it comes to like the whodunit side of horror, when it's done right, it's done. I mean, it's amazing. Right. But when it's done wrong, where it's predictable, and you're like, okay, there's no way that guy's he's a fucking killer. Yeah. What was that something that you were worried about when making this movie?
Yeah, the problem is, Travis, there's nothing new in the sun. So unfortunately, all of the ideas have been used up. So your job as a filmmaker is, even if you have an original idea or close to one, it's still going to be influenced by something. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to do your best to kind of take ownership of it and do something as different as you can, or do something that's out there, but do it better, or do it with more sincerity. I'm big on realism. Now, in any horror film, you've got to suspend disbelief. Unfortunately, you can't do it. And there's always going to be tropes because people expect tropes. But for us, what I wanted to do is this killer returns, and there is a FBI agent who kind of got molderized because he believed this killer was out there, but there was extenuating circumstances which would make it impossible, or so they thought. And so this cop basically ruins this FBI agent's career, and he puts away 3 people because he thinks they're guilty, but he may have not used the most integritous means. And so when he realizes the killer's returned, he's desperate to make the connection and find out. And so he works outside the law, and we make it very evident he's working outside the law, and we do everything within a 48-hour span. So it's happening in what we try to create like a fake real time, because in real time, if a cop went rogue, it would not take people long to figure it out. If a killer is killing people in a haunt, they're going to get out. So he's got to move really quickly. So we really try to keep it tight. So it starts off with the day before, then you go into night, and then once the action starts, it is fluid. There's no break. It's happening in that facade of real time. And so that's what we tried to do. The other thing was try to make the characters authentic. So we did a scene where basically you get to know these characters, and then you want to watch out for exposition because you can really get heavy in that, and then the audience gets bored. But I wanted people to connect with these characters because I wanted it when they did meet their fate or were being chased, I wanted people to care. Like, oh my God, this is a single mom who just got her kids back. Oh my God, this is a family who just bought a house. This person just got their master's degree after their mom died. One her mom's dealing with cancer, and she's talking about that. So there's a lot of cool elements to develop that. Also, we added humor, and probably a lot more than I originally wanted to. So it sometimes feels like a dark comedy, but it's not. They overuse the Office humor. You see a lot of that kind of Matrix in a lot of films. I didn't want to go that route, so I thought, how do people talk when we joke around? And that's what I did. It's just, nothing's forced. It's just natural comments. There's a scene where the caretakers come up and they're obviously very redneck. And one of the lines is, when did we walk on the film of Night of the Living Inbred? And, comments like that, that would happen, but aren't forced. Because, like they always say, dying is easy, comedy is hard. The hardest thing to write is comedy, real comedy. I say the hardest thing. Horror is really the easiest to write because you're tapping into people's fears. And we have more commonality in our fears than we think. And I still think that horror is like the last bastion of folklore, like the campfire stories that our ancestors told around the fire to teach morality or keep people out of the woods or, guide their children. And they were passed down from generation to generation. Some became legends and myths, and some just became morality tales. So I think horror is still that. But adding comedy, you got to be careful, because you've seen this too, Travis. Marvel has done it to such an extent that they almost lessen their dramatic scenes. And so I wanted to be very careful that the humor was well placed. I want the film to be taken seriously and not taken seriously at the same time. So we had to really balance that in the right parts.
Totally understanding. Yeah. Now, when it comes to when you were making this film, it's hard. So I can imagine it's hard as a filmmaker to. Okay, I'm trying to think of how to answer the question. I watched, and you probably done it too. I watched so much horror where it's kind of laughable, in not a good way, on the decisions that the characters make, and you're like, "Fuck!" Nobody in real life would do that.
Right.
Was that something you were conscious of when you were making your film?
Yeah, the three things that I agreed on to this horror film was it had to have stories, it had to have character development, and I had to make the characters react as real as possible. Now, some people do freeze, And some people do make stupid decisions. We see it every day. Like
Yes.
you probably have people you're like, how did you survive past birth?
Exactly.
But we see it a lot in social media. Tide Pod Challenge. Anyway, but so we have a mix of that. When everything starts to break loose, you get to see that myriad of reaction. And so no one is killed because they're doing stupid things. They're killed either because they're unprepared, the killer is one step ahead of them, or they just don't know how to react. And fear will cripple you. And some of them do very heroic things. And again, there's a great scene in Kong Skull Island where the guy like pulls the grenade and he's like going to jump in the monster's mouth to save the day. The monster takes him by the tail and whips him against the rock. And it's a heartbreaking scene. You're like, wait a second. That's what the martyr's death. So there are scenes like that where I think that's very realistic. I think we get used to kind of like the martyr's death, but that doesn't happen all the time. The guy running across the battlefield who, leads the charge usually gets taken out within 3 or 4 seconds because he's got every bullet in the world coming at him. So we wanted to have heroic moments, but also taper them down with that reality of, is it going to be a heroic moment or is it kind of going to go the wrong way? But it's very difficult because you're right. A lot of horror films go either take themselves too seriously or they go the corny route. And we were trying to walk the line. We're not Terrifier 3, which I do applaud because any film that I think he might be $100 million, $2 million, and he's like one of the most, I think, one of the most profitable horror films ever made, even more so than The Blair Witch. Congratulations to him. I'm not a big fan of the Terrifier only because it's a little too much gore. Even though the practical facts, it's too much gore. But I think that people are hungry for films that have story, that have characters, even though there's a attention deficit because, every video's got to be 30 seconds to a minute on TikTok. I do think there's a certain group of people that are hungry for that. And I think it's the Gen X, the millennials, and the leftover boomers are like, we like to go back to the movies that we grew up on. And that's where it is. Not to copy nostalgia, because that's not going to work. I don't talk about reboots, but to try to capture what those films represented. And what I think they represented was real life.
Yeah.
They did. We laugh at it now, but you look at The Breakfast Club, and we acted like that. Like there were people who acted like that. Now you watch one of these teen things like, no one acts like that. No one talks like that. Yeah. Exactly. So I don't even know what the future is going to be. They're going to be like films about IRL, which is one of the most irritating art forms. But it really is. The 80s did 3 things. They were real. They had this real kind of intimacy to them. Like you felt connected to films. You could relate to them. And lastly, they looked beautiful. They really did. We were so critical back then of things. And then you look back and you go, holy crap, that looks 10 times better. You look at Alien. I just saw Alien in the theater. I never saw Alien in the theater when I was a kid because I was allowed to. But I finally saw Alien in the theater. And had they not been smoking on the ship, I would never have known that was made. You could fool people thinking that was made today. And you'd be like, those effects hold up. That was made in the 1970s, right? It was 1979, I think, or 8?
1979.
Yeah. That I mean, what is that? That's almost 45 years old, right? 45 years old?
Yeah, I was born in 82. I'm 42, so
yes,
yeah.
I mean, that's insane. That film looks better than Thor Love and Thunder. How does that happen? And the budget was minuscule. I mean, it was a small budget film. It really was. So you got to get back to roots. And it's very tough. I think it's easier for folks like us because we have a love for what we're doing. If I was a 22-year-old, I might enjoy the films, but I don't really have a connection to them. So I might try to copy them, but it's not going to have that authenticity. And I'm not insulting 22-year-old filmmakers. I love young filmmakers because they're trying new things and experimenting. Some of them fall flat on their face. Some of them do well. Hey, fall on your face because that's how you learn. Yeah. Without failure, there's no success. But they can't connect like we can. So you'll never see another Uncle Buck. You'll never see another 16. Now, again, there are some obviously themes in those movies that might not play today. But you won't see St. Elmo's Fire. You won't see a Halloween like it was made, or a Friday the 13th, or a Nightmare on Elm Street. They tried it. Look what happened. It went completely sideways because Robert Englund made Freddy. You know, 100%. Exactly. So, and that's where I disagree with Anthony Mackie. He's like the death of the movie star. I don't want the movie star. I love Will Smith. barring the slap. If you think about it, as he got bigger, every character, it wasn't the character, it was Will Smith as the character. Tom Cruise, it's Tom Cruise as the character, right? When Robert Englund became Freddy, he was Freddy.
He was right? Freddy, 100%.
And that started happening in Marvel. Robert Downey Jr., forget what he did before, he's Tony Stark. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it's funny, Michael Keaton used to bash being Batman, and now he embraces it. William Shatner, remember? He was bashing the comic book. Now he embraces it because those characters connect. And this is where, you took Matt Walsh likes to really pick on that era. And Matt Walsh has some base takes and some crap takes, but he doesn't realize that for some of us, those movies were therapy. One of the biggest heartbreaks for me is when I had a really bad childhood, and so I looked up to some of these TV fathers, and one of my role models was Bill Cosby, because you look at him as a father in that show, and he had this. He was masculine and he was strong, but he loved his family, and family was first. When all this stuff happened with him, it literally like they ripped my heart out, because I would have never thought of all the people in the world, not Bill Cosby, right?
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, take that aside, I connected with that character. I didn't have a father figure in my life, so he became that surrogate father figure. And the writing was so good and so pure that there was a lot of great morality stories there. It defied the whole 10-minute sitcom ending, right, that you see in a lot of the films. Series like Family Matters and all that. Cosby was a different level because he put what you just talked about. He added the realism to the sitcom, and going full circle back, you're talking about, you got to add that to the horror film, because I think people are too smart to say he tripped on a rake, or they're being chased by the killer like that commercial. Let's go in the shed with the chainsaws, not jump in the car. People are kind of beyond those type of foolishness. They, even Terrifier, it's like the comeuppance again, but some of them aren't. They're innocent people. But the reason why Terrifier gets the edge on them is because art is supernatural. So you can't stop him. So that's frightening. But there is a level of realism to it, almost too much. The Saw movies, another example of that. He added that element of realism, which really struck our fears. The movie Seven is really a prime example.
Seven's great.
Of that deep realism. So, but I don't know if many people can make those type of films. Even the people we love, the Spielbergs, the Lucases, can't seem to bring back that magic.
It's
and that's
gone.
sad. What is going on, It's
gone.
So, you go ahead.
I agree with you, but one thing real quick about what you said about Will Smith. Like, Will Smith, I like him as an actor, right? But you never ever in any of his movies say to yourself, oh, I like him because he plays Hitch.
Yeah.
No, you like him because he literally plays Will Smith in as every character. Yeah. He doesn't have that range of acting.
No.
But people still like him because it's Will Smith.
It's the stardom. And if you think about it, name one character name he's played. And you can't think of, Will Smith Independence Day.
Hitch.
That was the only one in the title, right? Tom Cruise, he's Ethan from Mission Impossible, and he's Jason Bourne. But again, it's funny because when you watch a new character, like they've got the new Jason Bourne series, that character is better than Cruise was because he's playing the character. Tom Cruise was playing Jason Bourne if Jason Bourne
you mean Matt
Tom
Damon.
Cruise. Yeah. So, yeah.
But so I do have a question when it comes to horror. And I don't know if it's because I'm old now or I'm getting older now, but like when it comes to newer horror movies, it's kind of hard for me to relate to the characters. And I don't know if it's because, once again, I'm old and these are, what teenagers talk like now or act, or is it just because these characters are just not relatable to anyone?
I think they're stereotypes. I think everyone was talking about we're moving away from stereotypes, and we haven't. We are actually stereotyping more. One, you're right. You look at the film, what was it? 2000, was it the one, the A24, where the robots, it was when Y2K.
Yeah, Y2K.
And first of all, they added Rachel Zegler, which is a huge mistake because Rachel Zegler has destroyed her career, not because of her acting, but because of she can't stop being on Twitter. But the characters were cardboard. They were caricatures of what a millennial kid would be, but whoever wrote it never dealt with a millennial kid. It's evident. So what you're doing is you're almost Xeroxing the characters, and the more you Xerox, the more copies you make, the less it looks. For guys like us and filmmakers like us, we're not copying, we're memorializing, right? We're taking our experiences and putting them into something. What's happening now with young filmmakers is they don't have that, and I think that's why there's so much angst, because so many people are so desperate to have a cause, and there's no causes because we've simplified life. So we really have simplified life so much that there's no struggle. I mean, we were flipping 8 tracks. You had to listen to an entire 8 track to get to the song you wanted. Like there was no. I remember I used to have the 2XL machine. I would put the 8 tracks in because it was the only time you could actually skip, right? And you never got in the right place.
Yeah.
We had cassette tapes. We had record players. We had Atari before Nintendo.
We had maps. We didn't have GPS.
Yeah, exactly. We had a big folded map. We had to earn it really. And I'm not slighting Gen Z or Alpha. It's not their fault. It's not really. It's because we were those parents trying to give their kids everything, and we learned that's not the way you handle it. But we had to earn everything. We had to earn seatbelts. Like how many times did you wear a seatbelt?
Never. I was telling somebody recently. As a kid, we used to sit in the back seat. The kids always sit in the back seat.
Oh yeah,
and in the back seat, a seatbelt was not required. Seatbelt was only required if you sat in the front seat.
Exactly. Or
and now,
I remember sleeping. We had a station. I remember sleeping on the back trunk thing of the in the back by the window. And while we were driving, we did stuff like that. The greatest personification is Action Park. There could never be an Action Park today. Never. And maybe that's a good thing. But Action Park embodies the 80s. Action Park is the incarnation of the 80s. So
my parents had one of those big conversion vans, right? And we loved it because it had Nintendo and TV in it, right? But like it had like in the back, it had like the bed that folded down, the chair that folded down, and I would just be sleeping on back there all the time. My parents would be taking road trips, no seatbelt on.
Nope.
They couldn't have said I could have flew the fuck right the window.
Well, those cars were also like tanks. So
yes, they were. Yes.
They weren't going anywhere. Now you bump into a little pole and you got $3,000 of damage.
Done. Yes.
So. But no, it really is. And again, I feel bad for Gen Z and Alpha. I'm not being patronizing. I feel bad because they don't have experiences. Everything is this now. Even the films that we grow up with. If you notice on TikTok, I'm seeing a lot of old films. They're like cutting them up and sending them. And people are like, oh, God, what is this film? So they're getting a resurgence. But then you get into, I want to make this film, but I want to make it up to for modern audiences. And when people say that, you can't do that. An 80s film is an 80s film. You got to make it the way it is or not. And the thing about 80s film that people don't realize, we did have strong female characters. A prime example, Better Off Dead. The girl basically helps the guy come out of his shell. Female character. We had Princess Leia. We had Sigourney Weaver. We had so many. We had Erin Gray from Buck Rogers. We did have that. And some of these movies did generate discussion. You could not make a Do the Right Thing today. And it was one of the most important movies ever made. You could not make a Blazing Saddles. People don't realize Richard Pryor wrote that script, and the idea was to make fun of racists. But people watch it and go, oh, it's racist. No, it's designed to make fun of racism. Yes. It's designed to make fun of social stigmas. You can't make those movies. So if you took Blazing Saddles and gave it to a Gen Zer, he would do his earnest to make a funny Western, but it would fall flat. The only one who came close, believe it or not, before was I think it's who did Family Guy?
MacFarlane.
A Million Ways to Die in the West. The director's
funny movie.
Blazing Saddles 2.0. It really is, it makes fun of all the same things. And it's okay to be offensive if it's done in a way that's that's designed to make people laugh at each other and themselves in a kind way. It's not designed to be a way to get back at people. And I don't know if we're mature enough as a society anymore to even do that. I don't think we are. I don't.
But this is something that I said, when it came to, I was an 80s kid as well. When it came to 80s horror movie, I don't care who you were. If you got in the path of the killer, you were going to kill. I didn't care if you were in a wheelchair. I didn't care if you were black, Hispanic. I didn't care if you had Down syndrome. I didn't care. I don't care if you were old, young, woman, whatever. You got in the path of Michael Myers, Jason, whatever. You were going to get fucked up.
Yep.
And now, if you look at modern horror, it doesn't have that diversity anymore. It doesn't have everybody looks like a model. You don't have average looking people.
100%.
You don't have overweight people, even though majority of the population in this country is overweight or obese. You don't have handicapped people in horror movies anymore. There's no one in a wheelchair.
No, God forbid you get canceled.
Yes, it's just like. And listen, I like the Scream movies, but like if you watch, especially the newer ones, if you watch, especially Part 6, I said this. My biggest thing with Scream 6 was I've been to Columbia University, right? And Columbia University is not filled with super attractive people. Like I watched that movie and everybody on campus looks like a model. Yeah. And I'm looking like that is not the true representation of Columbia University.
No,
it's not.
If you look at Halloween, although the characters are all attractive, they look like people that would exist in your neighborhood. When you look at Friday the 13th, the first movie, again, they look like people you grow up with. Look at a movie like Footloose. They all look like people you would grow up with. Yes. In that certain thing, in that certain town or demographic. Everyone's trying to create these Instagram models, and they're such a small percentage of the population. Because if you look at TikTok, there are people with millions of views who look like average people, and they're competing with the girls that might have a Patreon or an OF, because people just relate to them. And that's the lesson. The reason why they have so many people is because guys like you and I relate to that. Hey, it's a normal person going through the stuff that we go through, and they're just basically putting it on TikTok to kind of express my frustration. That there is an audience. It's getting slimmer, but the boomer, the Gen Z, millennial audience really want to go back to the films they love. The Gen Z and Alpha are hungry for good films. They just don't know what they look like because they haven't exposed. How many people in that demographic have seen The Godfather, have seen a film like The Maltese Falcon, have seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which is an amazing movie about political corruption. How many people do that? You look at The Thing. The Thing is amazing. That is the ugliest cast ever, and that movie is really awesome. You look at
They Live. How about They Live?
Oh yeah, right.
Like majority of younger horror fans have never seen that movie, and that movie talks about a lot of things that's going on right now. It's amazing. Everyone says the '80s were out of touch. I remember the '80s as being a time where we talked things out. There was debate. Nothing was perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was a good time. Now, I wouldn't want to go back because you got to move forward, but it gets crapped on, and you're like, you have no idea. I remember going to Blockbuster Video. You got 2 movies. You ordered yourself a large pizza from Pizza Hut, right? You got a couple of bottles, 2 liters of Pepsi, not Diet Pepsi, Pepsi, and you watched movies back to back with your friends, and those were like massive memories, right? Yes.
It doesn't happen anymore. Well, I mean, obviously, but it doesn't happen anymore. When we were kids, we rode bikes and into areas we probably should have been. There was an adventure spirit. There was a conquering spirit. They try to say that's IRL. IRL isn't conquering spirit. IRL is I got a bunch of people saying stuff to me, and I want to please them. When we were out there living life, it wasn't about pleasing anybody. It was about living in the moment and building memories. And to bring it back to horror, the problem is, one, the cookie cutter element of the characters all look beautiful and they're all stereotypes. The second thing is the feel is gone. Like it's just not there anymore, and they make too many sequels. Like right now, Terrifier is actually telling a story, right? And they're actually evolving art. That's impressive. You think about Halloween 1 and 2 bookmarks; they're done. We didn't need the cult of Michael Myers, and we didn't need Rob Zombie's thing, because Rob Zombie was just a kill fest. It's gore porn, all right? And you can watch. I have no problem with people who enjoy gore porn. I call it that because it's that love of that blood. And listen, practical effects guys love that because they get to really challenge themselves. I understand that, but they don't have the soul. There's no soul to them, and we tried to do that with this film, and I'm hoping people feel that way. I really try to do that with all my productions, but resources tend to play a part. But we did this for $20,000, and when I said to the distributor, we had 12 locations, 65 actors, and he said, "You did this for $20,000?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "This does not look like a $20,000 film," and he didn't put a dollar amount out there, but I know what he was thinking, and it looks like a much more expensive film because we were blessed with these phenomenal actors and these locations. We filmed half the film at Lake Hickory Haunts, and I can't thank them enough, because you could imagine to build all those sets would be millions of dollars. It would literally be millions, and we had a whole set to work with, and we had a lot of people volunteer locations to us because they wanted to be part of the movie making and they wanted to be part of the magic. And we had extras like, "I want to be in the movie, I want to be," and it was really cool. Two of our sponsors ended up in the film. Nick Powell, who doesn't own, but he's part of South Mountain Distilling. He plays a cop, and he's a moonshiner in the film. And J.B. Rayner, the godfather of moonshine, is in the film. I mean, it's really cool to have these cool characters there. But the other thing is, when I was casting, I was very careful to pick normal people. I mean, I really wanted these people to be, if you look at the cast, it's people you would meet on the street. And one of the greatest parts of it, not to ramble, but Clam Sepulveda, who plays Rob in the film, he plays the guy who dressed up as the Moon Monsters. Rob is the kind of guy that isn't the leading man, right? So he does a lot of films. He's in the background. He's an extra. A lot of stuff gets cut, and he constantly hits this wall. And he was telling me about this. And I said, "You know what, Rob? Let's put that in the movie. Let's have you dialogue that in the movie." And he sells it because that's coming from his heart. And any actor who hasn't been able to break the glass ceiling is going to relate to that, especially if you're not the quote unquote leading man look. And I'm okay with that. Listen, it's okay if we have beautiful people in films, but with horror, they got to look like regular people, or else you're not really do. And that's just going to then it's just either I want kill count, I want to see how much gore. That's really it. You're not into it for the story. And the problem with that is, how do you keep ratcheting that up? Eventually, you're going to enter areas you don't want to enter as a filmmaker. Because, I think this last one, there were kids who died, and there's still kind of a tightrope walk with that. I don't think he showed it, but it was evident there was noises, and people got because nobody wants. One of the reasons I can't watch Pet Sematary to this day, and I know it's a fake, is the fact that the little boy gets killed. And it really, really, as a father of two, for some reason, that viscerally affects me. So you got to be careful, because with good horror, like the Halloween series, it was a good horror story because it had likable characters and a really believable killer. And then they went off the rails. But you can do that. But you also have to say, okay, there's a limit. Like, at some point, I've got to say, okay, it could be a cash grab, but I don't want to move it, and I want to have integrity, so I move on to the next project. And I don't want anybody else to take that project to lessen it. And that's, again, John Wick's a prime example. The first one is so intimate. It has that indie feel.
Amazing.
Keanu Reeves is one of the best acting scenes, is that minute or 2 minutes where he gets the dog. I challenge anyone to pull that acting scene off the way he did. It envelops all of the moments of grief, all the moments. The second one was good, but it felt like the Walmart version. The third one, and then by the fourth one, you got a bulletproof suit that can deflect bullets, but doesn't have any impact on you. It just gets.
And it was like 3 hours long. Because I saw all of the John Wick movies in the theater, right? The first one, I went to see a drive-in. I went to a drive-in, and I didn't go to see that movie. It was like the third movie in the drive-in near my house, so you get to see 3 movies. And it was like the last movie. I was like, okay, well, let me see what it is. So I sat there and watched. I was like, oh my God, this movie is so good. I remember I was because it flew under the radar. I don't even think it was number 3 in the box office.
No,
and I kept telling people, John Wick, and it just caught. And eventually, people started becoming a cult classic, and that's when Part 2 came out. Big box office, box office. But I agree. Part one just had that low budget indie feel to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like once you start throwing, by the way, people want to think I bash Terrifier, and I'm not bashing Terrifier. But when I said Terrifier 3, I felt like to me lost its soul, and it because I felt like it was going in the right direction with part 2, and I just felt like some filmmakers, the more budget they get or more money they get, they kind of lose who their creativity. And that's why I dislike Terrifier 3, because I felt like it didn't have the essence of the original 2.
No, I thought the story arcs were imaginative, but again, it goes back to the focus was not that. They added that in. Focus was just can I talk?
I want to offend
you. Hit the wall. You eventually hit the wall. You know.
I want. It was all about I want to disturb people and offend people as much as possible.
Right.
In a movie for 2.5 hours, and I saw that in the theaters. And I'm telling you, 40 minutes into it, I was looking at my phone like, okay,
yeah,
this is too much. This is too long. There's I've debated people about this. People say, "Oh, the acting was great in that movie," and I'm like, "No, it wasn't."
Yeah.
It seems like you said, it seemed like all of the kills were planned before the actual story.
Yeah.
And I thought that, it took a step back from Terrifier 2. That's my personal...
No. I don't disagree with you. The same thing happened with the Thing prequel. The Thing prequel is not a bad movie, but it does not stand up to the Thing because there didn't need to be made another Thing, because at that point, you've told the story. You're replicating the claustrophobic, hopeless. All you can do is make the Thing scarier. And what happens is either you go into the uncanny valley with too much CGI, or you run out of things to shock people with. And horror fans, it's hard to offend them because they're prepared. Your mainstream people might, but they're not going to. Their mainstream people aren't going to go see a Terrifier 3.
No.
If they saw Terrifier 2, they're going to be like, I can't do another one. Your art fans are going to be like, hell yeah. But eventually they're going to get bored too. It happens. We've seen it happen multiple, even with Freddy Krueger. I think beside the first one, their biggest one was Dream Warriors, right? That was when it picked up again, and then it went straight down again. Yeah, because it was so well done. And you think the Jason movies, the first 4 really tell the whole story. The only time they actually, I think, were able to get some more excitement was Jason 10, because it was so freaking bonkers. Like Jason in space. But even then, again, you get to a point of, okay, what do we do after that? Like, what do we do? The same thing's going to happen with the Evil Dead franchise. Eventually, you there's only so gross you can get before people are just like, this is just silly. Yeah.
It's just done. It's done.
Yeah.
I'm not excited to see another Evil Dead movie. I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. Evil Dead Rise was okay,
Yeah.
And I've supported the Terrifier series, even though I'm not a fan of the Terrifier series. When I say I support, I saw part 2 and part 3 in the theaters, and I paid money for them and went at midnight to see them, because the movie theaters in my area only showed them at like 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
So but I will not go. I might watch it on the streaming service, but I wouldn't for a Terrifier Part 4, which there is going to be a Terrifier Part 4. I would not go to. I would not spend my money to go to the theater to see that.
No, I agree. There's a lot of films.
Because I know that series should have ended at Part 2.
Yeah, bookended. It's like Equalizer. The first one, the second one, they bookend each other. They put the third one out as a cash grab. It was terrible. And Denzel Washington's one of my favorite actors, but the first 2 told the story. Yep. John Wick, the first one told it didn't need to have a sequel. The movie Nobody, which is getting a sequel, didn't need a sequel. The Accountant doesn't need a sequel because they tell the full story. Everybody wants to believe their IP is, if you turn it into a mathematical equation, they want it to be the pi, and it goes forever, right? When really most movies are 2 + 2 = 4, or 1 + 1 = 2. They don't have this innumerable equation that runs out to infinity. It doesn't happen. Even Star Wars runs its course. Even
I'm
Indiana
done with Star
Jones.
Wars.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm done with Star Wars.
There's a whole different story, a whole different podcast. But if you think about it, the first 3 movies told the story. Now, would I have loved to see some of the novels turn into movies? Absolutely. When they had the Shadows of the Empire, that would have been great. But there is a point where we keep asking for stuff, and be careful what you ask for, because then you get it. There can, like Dr. Sleep, there was no reason to make a sequel to The Shining.
No one asked for that.
It's one of the most, I don't. Everybody says it is movie making 101. It's one of the best movies ever made. There was no reason to make a sequel. The Dead Zone with Christopher Walken. There was no reason to make reboot it.
The Exorcist. There was no reason
Poltergeist. No need for it. No need for sequels or reboots. Just leave them alone. Enjoy them. You don't have to make it contemporary. And again, a lot of the stuff in Poltergeist holds up today and better because they did all those amazing practical effects. So yeah, that and you know, do I have a sequel planned for this movie? Yes, I always did, because I want to do the Halloween 1, Halloween 2 thing, where the first one's kind of more hard, the second one is, you know, balls out, you know, super excited, you know, balls to the wall kind of stuff. But I would not make more than that, and I might not make a sequel. Depends on the reception. I would prefer to make a movie, move on to the next movie. Make a movie, move on to the next movie, because then if I'm all making sequels, I'm not putting anything new into it. You know, I mean, yeah, I can work around with the clay, but it's still the same mold, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going over to a different thing. You know, it's still going to be a tree. I can make the tree have different branches. I can make the tree look like this oak or this birch. It's still a tree. What happens if I want to go over here and make a rabbit now? I can't do that with the tree, you know? So I don't know if that was a good example or not, but anyway.
No, you become a one-dimensional filmmaker.
You be a one-trick pony.
And listen, I want to see Damien Leone step outside of Terrifier and make something else. I really do. And I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but like, I would love to see, you know, him step out of that IP and into something else, because I think he has a great vision, and that practical effects are absolutely amazing.
He needs to do a Lovecraftian movie. He needs to go to Lovecraft, pick one of the novels, and try to make that movie, because if anybody could make that movie, he can. I would love to see him make a true Lovecraftian film, because he's got the visual prowess, because that's what's going to take. For a Lovecraftian film, you got to have someone strong with visual ability. He could do that. He doesn't need to do the next Evil Dead. He doesn't need to do the next reboot of Jason. He needs to do something original. Pull something out of that. Go to Clive Barker. There's so many stories Clive Barker wrote. If he really wants to do really solid body, frightening horror, you got Barker and you got Lovecraft. There you go. Pick your topic. So,
I agree. All right, listen, Ron, where can everyone find you, my friend? I could talk to you all night, man, but it is 11 o'clock at night here.
I enjoy talking so much, Travis. It's so fun. And I hope I didn't get too much off topic, but yeah. You can share the links, but on Facebook we're Beyond Hero Productions. On same thing for Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. On YouTube, you can watch the trailer for free. Also on YouTube, we have for free The Devil's Daughter, which is our Harley Quinn horror story. And then if you go to Stash Thrills and Chills on YouTube, you can watch our short film Rescue. And also on Fawsome Horror, Rescue's on there. So, and then if you want to watch Stro Sinister Cinema, which is kind of our horror host take, our Riff Tracks take on horror films, that's on Amazon Prime. So we're all over the place right now.
Ron, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. Listen, I look forward to seeing your it. All right, everyone. Listen, down in the description, links, all that good shit. Please follow my man Ron. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. If we're still here next week, I'm Travis Bruce. And that's Ron Rossman. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, Travis.